Hey, I want to take just a second here to say thanks. We're going to be talking to Jacob Warren today. He is a lighting designer and he's got a lot of experience in the industry. Should be a good conversation. Thanks, Jacob, for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, man. So you and I have actually known each other for quite some time, but you're actually new to our team, and you and I knew each other through different connections in the industry, and we've had some, good and fun experiences, which I'm sure we'll get to talk a little bit about. But today I was really hoping we could just talk a little bit about design and how you approach design and what kind of goes through your mind as you're looking at different lighting stuff, whatever. But before we kind of jump into the meat of the whole thing, why don't you just give us some background? Who is Jacob Warren? What's your experience, and how did you get here?
Absolutely. Well, I originally got here by just being a small church tech in Central Texas. My mom didn't have anything else to do with me, so she handed me off to the church, said, "Take care of them," and I got to go to work. And that's how it kind of was. And
that was when you were real young, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I started when I was about 11.
Wow.
They were asking when could the kids start doing tech, and they said anytime we need them, we need them all. So they put me behind a camera. That was actually the very first thing I did. And the very first thing I did when I ran the women's conference was pull the camera off the tripod and start walking around with it. But I didn't know that there was wires attached. So that was very bad. But they love the creativity and the way that I thought about just pulling the camera off, because nobody had just, hey, let's pull the cameras off. So then it opened up a bunch of conversations, and I ended up getting added into the lighting team and working my way from there and building connections in the church. So the church is really where I started. And that's where my original heart and passion lies. And it's where I get a lot of my inspiration from. It's from the church and the church world, the worship and house of worship industry. And all of that collides into kind of where I think and how I think creatively and problem solve.
Yeah, but then, before we skip over that, one of the advantages of working, at a church or really any environment where you get to put your hands on a lot of technology is it kind of is your own sandbox, right? I mean, tell us a little bit about before you made the transition to the professional world. Tell us a little bit of just playing with gear and what that was like for you when you were young.
Absolutely. So, I mean, at a young age, I was given, multiple millions of dollars worth of equipment to kind of break, and not on purpose, obviously, but I do remember specifically a story where we got the Grand MA Command Wing. It's brand new. And the pastor came over to youth building to see it freshly installed and used. And I had set my coffee up on my laptop to take a picture and kind of show everybody my new console. And the subs had just came on and knocked my coffee over when the pastor was watching, looking at me over onto the new console. And he looks at me and I look at him and he's like, you're gonna fix that, right? So then with my brand new console that I just unboxed that day and used that day, I now had to then take apart and kind of fix and clean and make sure it still works. So I got to learn all the steps of troubleshooting, and just like everything, you were given a bunch of opportunity to spend a bunch of time, they pretty much hand you keys and say, if you can figure this out before tomorrow morning, you got the job. If you can't, well, we're going to find someone else to do it. And that's the end.
And that's a common theme that I hear from a lot of guys that really begin to take off in their career is that not only are they given an opportunity to mess with a whole bunch of gear, but they also have to take the opportunity to mess with it, right? I know a guy in particular that was on the Bud Light tour. He was the LD for the Bud Light tour. And he can point to a moment where he didn't really know much about lighting at all. He was a warehouse technician for a lighting rental company. And when he was bored, he was wasn't doing anything. And one day somebody came through and they're like, that if you can learn more about the fixtures and the guys that are out there, you're going to get to go out there. And so he just started setting up his own little things inside the warehouse. Then specifically, they bought a bunch of new inventory. He was the only one playing with it because he was in the warehouse all the time. And then he was the only guy that knew how to run it. So then he started getting sent out to go do gigs. And then that's ultimately what, launched him. So that's such an important lesson for, I think, a lot of young technicians is, dude, if you got the time, you got the opportunity to just get your hands on gear, figure it out, spend time messing with it. Yeah. Don't necessarily dump coffee on it. That's not recommended. But
no, not at all.
Yeah. So, okay. So that kind of gets us to a stage where then You get, a little bit older, you graduate from high school, and then you make a transition from the church tech world into kind of the professional lighting world. Tell us a little bit how that transition worked out.
So that transition actually worked out well for the church. The church actually funded that whole transition. Not in like a negative way, but I had to go to Bible college. I had to go do something. My mom was telling the pastor, he's got to go to college. I know you love him. I know you love to have a lighting guy around, but he's got to go to Bible college, or he's got to go to college or something. So they paid for my tuition to go to Bible college, which the one I chose had a really high, resolve in tech and like putting tech into churches and why tech is important in the worship arts ministry and like what the importance of all that. So I really wanted to take that track and move forward, and the church kind of helped out with that. So working alongside professionals in the industry at this college or at the Bible vocational school, whatever you want to call, wherever you go for whatever. But basically I chose to run towards that instead of like going to like a normal college. I went towards something that was sort of geared towards kind of like tech. And so we learned a lot about all kinds of different stuff. I learned there was much more than just tech and much more than just lighting and video and like sound equipment that's also included in tech, like social media, all of the things that are included into what we do is kind of what this class went over. So transitioning into the professional world was kind of just unknowingly like happening, like the way was just kind of made. And so going to the Bible college and like, studying with everybody and then putting out what I knew as far as like a lighting guy. And they were like, well, they did the same thing, just like every other church. Hey, here's keys. When you're done with your classes, if you want to come over and work on the lighting console, work on the fixtures that are in the like back that aren't working, we haven't used them in years, you're more than welcome to. So who was up at 2 a.m., not studying, not doing his homework? Me fixing lighting fixtures and trying to get lasers to come out of them and putting laser dot lasers on them. Yeah. Doing all kinds of cool stuff. And then the Bible college was like, do you need a job? And I was like, of course I need a job. I'm always broke, as a professional in college, young teen, you always are looking for ways to make more money and make sure your life's more comfortable. So I started working, started doing different things. I got more opportunities from my professors and some of my, kind of higher ups and friends. And luckily the Bible college was over near Houston, kind of Katy area. So I was able to gain a lot of opportunities within that area, with like the rodeo coming into Houston and being able to tech and work off of Rhino and do a little bit of stagehand work. And, that's something that I always kind of try to remind people is don't ever like exclude yourself or put yourself above working as a stagehand for a big lighting rig. Like, I would say today, if someone called me to go work Eurovision today as a lighting tech to just run cable, I would do it. Like, just because that's awesome, as a lighting tech,
and being somebody who I've hired a lot of people in the professional event space and a lot of stage hands and stuff. When you're doing a load in and then you start realizing that a guy knows how to spike truss, he knows, what fixtures to grab, he knows how to, patch stuff or whatever, like all of a sudden you start taking note. You're like, oh, I want this guy back, And so while, those staffing agencies can have some negative connotations sometimes, there's a lot of path to being recognized. If you take the opportunities that you have, then you show up, you show the skills that you've got, and then, the people that are booking those, it's like, okay, I want this guy back. And then how do I get him back? Okay, well, eventually you're going to build a network of people that want you to show up on more and more shows, right?
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what I remind everybody is I was just a Bible college kid. Right. And they were asking me to come out and set pyro for the PBR World Series tour or whatever they call it. And I was like, cool, pyro, yeah, let's do it. And it was the lighting crew needed an extra guy that knew lighting because all the pyro was connected back to a large Grand MA console.
Yeah.
And it was perfect. And then that's how I got my in. And then I met a bunch of friends in the industry, and then when I moved on from Bible college and back to the church, a lot of people are afraid to move backwards or go back to something and retake kind of a claim of what you started. I went back to the church because they needed a lot of help. Well, they needed help from industry friends that I had gathered while I was working. So people that I had done stuff for are now, I call them up and say, hey, I got a conference. I'm trying to figure out where to rent this gear. They're like, no, don't rent it. I have it in my back closet.
Yeah.
I'm a church over here in so-and-so. You want to just come over here and grab it for me? I'm not even using it. Yeah. Like, yeah, of course. So you build connections on top of that. So that was really my start into the professional, like now I'm actually a full-time technician at the church that I originally started at. I'm like the production guy. The other production guy left and moved on to other things. I took over his role. Like we're moving. We're setting up conferences. I'm designing shows now. I hadn't designed a show before then for the church. I'm now designing stuff. I'm getting different gear from friends. So I'm doing all of the things that a production guy would do, which is assemble all the pieces of the puzzle and start like laying out the roadmap to what they're going to do and what their production life is going to look like.
I have a pretty similar roadmap that I took to get into the professional AV industry, where I was working for a church, became the technical arts director at the church. Really, they trusted me to just pull off whatever I could dream up, and they tried to resource me in that capacity, and I was able to do a lot of really unique and cool things. And so I was doing lighting design, doing stage design. I was in charge of the entire department with audio and video and the whole thing. And I did that for a long time, and then like you said, I needed some extra money, and so I started talking to people that were outside the church, in the industry. And this was back in Austin, Texas, and South by Southwest comes and rolls through town every year, and South by needs all the labor that you can find on planet Earth, basically. And so I started talking to some guys, and they're like, well, yeah, when South by comes, you can work as many hours as you can stay awake for. Like, it's, unlimited. And so I started doing that. And then one year I took over the Red Bull stage. And we can get into a little bit of, I designed the entire Red Bull stage, lighting, video. We weren't in charge of the audio for that particular thing, but we did the lighting and video. And then all of a sudden, the guys that have been in the industry for a long time started going like, dude, who is this guy? Where did he come from? Like, and I literally had a guy pull me aside. He's like, what rock have you been hiding under? Because there's no way that somebody, knows what you know. And I'm like, I worked at a church, and it's amazing what you can figure out, what you can do when you have those opportunities. So that's a good lesson, I think, for a lot of young guys. Is I will say that I had a professional guy who owns a lighting company out of New Orleans, and he told me that churches either make the best technicians or the worst technicians.
Yeah.
So you gotta decide which side of the equation you're going to be on, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think if you're a church technician, you can make it at South by Southwest. I think you're in good shape.
Yeah, you're doing all right. Yeah.
At Southwest 3 times.
Okay, so eventually you make a transition out of the church and you go full in. So just tell us a little bit about that transition, and then we're going to kind of get into some of the, not only the professional stuff that you do, but we're just going to, you and I are going to nerd out a little bit on design and how we pick gear and stuff like that, and try to make this a good conversation for people that are trying to learn.
Absolutely. So once I felt like the church had all it really could offer me and where I was headed, I'd been reaching out. I've been working with Rhino for a really long time and been doing stuff ever since I was like 18 for Rhino. And at this point, I'm 20. I'm already graduated from Bible college. Bible college is only a year program. I'm back at the church. I've been working for about a year. We're about to turn 21. It's this summer. Like, just things are going well for me. I've got concerts and shows and stuff in Dallas. I'm doing Dallas Cowboy cheerleader, events and stuff in the Intercontinental in Dallas. Like, these are big things. And I'm like, wow, this is awesome. And I'm talking to friends. And, ultimately I get a message on Facebook from a colleague that I worked, with a while back. And it's like, hey, would you want to come join my company that I'm working with and working for? Like, we just need more lighting people. We don't have anybody. Mm-hmm. And at the time I was like, sure. I didn't know what that meant. Like, obviously I've on a show with a bunch of people on tour, you're like, man, like, there's a lot of lighting people here. Everybody here knows how to plug a console in and get a light going.
Yeah.
It just seems like that. And then when you get a call and you're like, can we borrow you or can we have you? And so I make a bunch of moves and make a bunch of conversations and end up moving myself out to the Florida area, Pensacola, Florida area. And I start working out there.
And that's when you really get involved with integration. And we,
I still do shows, of course.
Yeah. And we could talk a little bit more about integration and stuff, but okay. So let's let's invite people into the design conversation, right? Okay. And I have kind of some principles that I design around, and then I just love to get your thoughts and opinions on that. And then, we can kind of just break it down, whatever. But if I could, for me personally, like, when I designed shows for Red Bull or for Yahoo I did a lot of corporate stuff, a lot of stuff for Samsung and, corporate stuff, bring in bands. And so we're designing a stage that's going to be multi-purpose. And on that stage, we're going to have Mary J. Blige and Brad Paisley and, D'Angelo. We're going to have a lot of different artists. And so you got to build a rig that's capable of a lot. And so I try to think in terms of balance and symmetry, that I want to find when I'm designing a rig, I'm thinking about, okay, what are the fixtures going to look like? Are they going to look balanced, and are they going to be symmetrical, from the audience's perspective? I'm looking at layers. So not only front to back from like the downstage edge or, over the audience back to the upstage edge, the back wall, but not only that part, but then also from top to bottom, right? So a lot of lighting obviously needs to come from the top. It's got to hit the talent, hit the face and all that stuff. But then you need some ground elements that are going to be interesting and stuff like that, on the ground. And then I always look for something unique that maybe either I'm using a fixture in a way that people haven't seen a fixture used before, or I'm finding fixtures that have unique elements that don't currently exist. So that's kind of the framework that I work under. Tell me, what's similar to you, what's different, and how do you approach it when right now we're talking about designing the rig itself.
Right. No, absolutely. And to play off those are all like very similar, kind of steps or like routines that I like look for when I'm like designing a rig, and building myself out, working, because you always get handed a bunch of notes. And everybody's like, we just want to do this, and we don't really know what's possible. And then they just have to have you build it. And then you're like, okay, where am I at? What am I doing? So when I'm thinking balance, I'm thinking more or less like, what's around? What can I block? What can I shade off? What can we set curtains to trim and pull out so we can balance out the room? Because there may be a concession stand over here and a basketball over here. Like, what can we pull that off? Because that's really imbalanced for me. That's not really helping the lighting elements. I can't light that stuff. It's just going to sit there. So me, as kind of someone who has attention issues and like working towards that, it kind of helps, everybody out, because I need to focus myself here. I need to center myself. And so when I think of balance, I always think of kind of like putting myself in the center and how to keep myself balanced in the center, and how lighting is going to help me do that.
It's important note that you're saying there is that if light illuminates something, if something becomes bright in the field of view, the human nature is to look at it.
Yeah,
I mean, that's just the way that's the way that we're wired, And so when you're a lighting designer, you have to really pay attention to what are the elements that I'm drawing people's attention to, and making sure that it's the thing that you want them to pay attention to. And the audience is, they oftentimes don't know how manipulated they are being by light, but that's the game, right? That's what you're trying to do. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, so many times I see lighting designers or people who are just running lighting are just lighting up ceilings. You're sitting at like a 95, almost 100-degree angle, like pointing at your ceiling, like, what's going on? You just pull them out, you have all this nice crowd wash, and everything's nice and flowy, which then brings you to like, just like running into the dimension, and like pulling out, the stops, all the stops, like really separating the rig out, when you're designing the rig, and not putting everything so close, to where you're like, oh, wow, those are just little eyeballs that are there. And then like all of a sudden it moves. You're like, oh, it's an aura. And you're like, what? No, why they were so close? I didn't even know. And then of course you listen when the music stops, you hear click, click. Well, it's because all the auras are rubbing against each other. There's no dimension there. You're not getting the beam spread you're looking for, and same thing, we're just with all of that, like using unique elements, like putting auras in a circle in a truss in the center. Like that's a unique element that now has the ability to fly out, and do this kind of UFO spin kind of thing. Like that's a fixture doing something that's not normally done. We're normally setting fixtures straight and in boxes and in hard angles and making sure we're all got a symmetry and balanced out. But balance doesn't always have to be straight. Yeah, it's kind of
right.
People forget that. Like we're like, oh, we got to put a bar in the air and it's got to be straight. Like it doesn't have to be. If your stage is curved, you can put a thing in there. You can put a circle somewhere. And there's a really good kind of theory that a church designer in Australia did for a really large church. And basically just he said that wagon wheels don't have to be reinvented. They just have to be used. And like, that's really good because most of the time, when he's sitting there, you're thinking, wow, I got to reinvent lighting design. No, find a design you like, put it into your stage. You say, wow, that looks really big and massive. And you're like, well, yeah, you're a 50-member church and trying to put Metallica stage in there. Just strip it down, find the symmetry, find the thing that you like the most about the stage, which is like the diamond Cortex truss sets that they put in there. So you put those in there and now you're like, wow, that looks awesome. So that's a lot of what I think of is like pulling your inspiration and then also understanding your inspiration and understanding your reality.
Yeah.
And understanding you don't have to redesign the entire wheel. You just have to move it and adjust it and balance it out for what your scenario is, what your reality is.
I think you got a couple of pictures that you can show. I don't know if do you have Vegas pulled up? So Jacob and I recently did a show together in Vegas, and I designed the rig, and then Jacob really did the lighting design. And we can, show that, and then we can show a couple of other pictures and kind of talk about, these elements of balance, these elements of layers and dimensions, and these elements of kind of unique elements, and how you use those three keys to build out a rig. All right, so this is a picture of the ballroom that we did in Vegas. This is for a company. It's a company conference, and it's called Sail Forward is the conference name, which is on the screen there. And I'll talk about a couple of things, and then I can obviously let you talk. But we've got two large iMag outboard screens left and right. We've got a center video wall on the downstage edge, or on the upstage edge. That's the delay wall that Jacob's cursor is in front of right there. But then we have a lot of lighting elements going all around this entire space. So one of the things that's unique in this particular drawing or this particular stage design is we use the LED strip tape. We put it in this large, like a 2-inch deep diffusion channel. And then we had this textured, three-dimensional textured stage design stuff. Yeah, there you go. A little bit easier to see. So there's the texture of the stage design. And so we're trying to get this raked color effect. But then Jacob, you took gobos on the moving head fixtures, did some breakup patterns, added that to it, and then really gave it, some of that texture, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. The actual LED wall is just like a black logo. Like there's not anything behind it. And we spread it out. And obviously this is right before we trimmed out and did some framing on it. But we added just kind of this breakup pattern here, and it really worked out really well and gave us kind of like more of a what we would consider balance, because we were kind of having the issue with on this side a nice pattern breakup, and then we had clear screen with nothing, then breakup, clear screen with nothing, breakup. And it just seemed like this stage was just not pulling your attention. So when we spread it out and we added a little bit more texture with the gobos, it seemed to bring quite a bit more balance to the rig. Also with the blend of the unique element is the LED tape.
And this picture is not shot from the center, but if it was shot from the center, you could see that the lights that are on the upstage truss, those are balanced fixtures. They're symmetrical. They're coming from the exact same dimension space, aiming in the right direction. We've got haze in the air so that you can see your beams. By the way, haze makes the beam a part of the whole design. So haze is extremely important to lighting design. But that's so some of the elements that we're talking about for balance and symmetry. Jacob, use your cursor and just kind of point at the number one truss right over the top of the audience. And you can see that the fixtures are all basically dropped at the exact same distance from one another. I don't want to get into like all the weeds and details, but just talk us a little bit. You're the one that spiked that truss, right? So I designed it, you spiked it, you're the one that hung the fixtures. Just give us a quick little thing. What is that like when you first walk into the ballroom, empty truss, and how do you spike it?
Yeah, absolutely. So first things first, you got to know the distance. Your design could have told you it was 40 feet, but you got to know what you're working with. Cause you notice if you look left and right here, I've got a motor here and on the other side I've got a motor. So I just lost myself 5 feet by putting that motor there. So in the design, I may have pulled all this stuff all the way to the end, which I did, and then when you get here, you're like, man, I had 40 feet. Now I have less than five. Now I'm at 30 feet. You just lost 10 feet just from a motor. And then you lose the same here on this motor, which we had some issues putting fixtures like the movers take up 2 points because they have 2 clamps on them. So that's difficult, and it's not to say that we didn't top ring mount the motors and all that stuff, but needless to say, you have to you have to know your rig. I said,
so you're not just willy nilly throwing fixtures up there is really what I'm getting at.
Exactly. Yeah. And so then once we measure, we just space them out off centers. And spacing the Lecos out was primary to me because that was the primary stage wash. That's what we're going to use for the main, we call money shots. And so that's what we need. We need to have a good, clean stage wash. And in order to do that, I need a good, clean separation and nice balance on the rig. And then we fill in the holes, aesthetically with the mover so the truss doesn't look bare. And so we also have functionality from that truss as well, and not just one. We don't want a one-trick pony, as they call it. So if I have a truss in the air and it's going to be holding a lot of weight, I need it to hold the LED wall. I'm going to have it hold some movers. I'm going to have it hold some delay speakers. Those are all elements when you're designing rig. But I'm also going to put movers on it so I can then add the gobo textures. And I wouldn't be able to do that if I didn't do that with the Lecos. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So that's kind of how we approached it.
Do you have any other rigs that you can show us?
Yeah. So here's a more centered shot.
Okay. So yeah, this is the same conference, but then now we've transitioned to the night party.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so you kind of see what we did with some of the Lecos and movers, kind of pointing back, adding some gobo texture. Then we black out this area because we want everybody to go to the dance floor. So there's areas where they're, going, but you can definitely tell we lit like the walls and we're doing a bunch of cool stuff. We got the disco ball in the center, which was a hit. Yeah. We love the disco ball.
And we initially got I think it was a 24-inch disco ball, and the client was like, that's not going to do. We're in Vegas. It's got to be. So we ended up with a 48-inch disco ball, which was ginormous, but it looked awesome.
It was. Yeah. It was awesome. Sure. So yeah, this is just kind of like throwing it back what we got, and then that's all for Vegas. We got a couple more things that we want to look at them now. We can break them down.
Well, so. Right now we're talking about the rig, but then the rig is kind of what you create first. And then the rig really sets you up for success to design a good show. But the two things are different, right? So the rig is like the technical actual fixtures, the pieces, like everything you're going to put together from a technology standpoint. And then when you get from the rig into the show, it's really this transition from the technical side of what we do into the artistic side. And I really prefer the term, the technical arts, because we are artists. And especially if you're a lighting designer, a lot of the human brain is dedicated towards vision, and vision is what we see is extremely important to the overall experience. And so we really begin to move into the show itself, and so designing a show. And once again, in the rig, I talk about, I'm looking for, if I'm designing a rig, I'm looking for balance, I'm looking for dimensions, and I'm looking for unique elements. When I'm going into designing a show, I'm looking for moments of beauty, I'm looking for moments of wow, and I'm looking for moments of darkness. That's kind of my 3 keys. So yeah, just take us into your show design process.
Absolutely. So this is like my favorite part. I mean, obviously we like designing lighting and all that, but when someone hands me like here's a rig, here's a show, here's a venue, here's a church, we got to do this event and this is what we got to do. I'm looking for specific key elements. I'm looking for high energy moments, so moments that they're going to be engaging with the crowd or engaging with the audience, or they're going to be engaging with an online presence. Or it's in a high energy moment, like a scream or like a shout, or, just something that's really like clearly bringing up the tempo and everybody's moving. And then another thing that we also look for, that I also look for, is specifically like just key points on the stage. So like if we have a drummer that he's on a riser, and then we have a guitar and a bassist, and they're on a lower riser, and then we have a platform in the middle, and it's like for a main artist to like stand up and like do some stuff. I want to look at those, I want to identify those, and I want to put those somewhere in my show, at least on fast calls for spotlights, so we can at least highlight the moments. And those are really, really important, because those are what we call money shots. Those are what we call big deal moments. So if there's a drummer is going to do a solo, or an artist is going to do something crazy on a platform, we want to know about it, or we want to at least try to attempt to make it happen.
Once the rig is already built up, now what are we going to do with that rig, and how are we going to design that to make it, really make the biggest impression to the audience?
Before we get into designing a live show, I'm going to go ahead and kill this real quick, so you can just not look at that. And so really, when we're designing a live show, we're looking for, as we discussed, 3 key moments: moments of beauty, moments of wow, and then moments of darkness. Moments of darkness is, if you're going to find out, and if you see any of my shows, is my favorite. If you give me darkness, I'm so happy. Mainly because I really love to pull like the wow after the darkness. And, you understanding how people's mind works, and how people like are I don't want to say like, tricked, but how people are uniquely led into, what is wow. If you pull a light off and then you flick it on really quickly, and then the beat drops at the same time, wow.
Right.
Okay, we can accomplish that. But then when mixing moments of beauty with moments of wow, that's where you really have to pull deep into the artistic of like, okay, what are we going to do? And those are the moments that we look for. So when we're looking for moments of beauty, I'm looking for key moments or key points, locations on the stage. Yeah. Center, left, right, up center, down center, and then we have audience, whatever. If we're doing something audience, we want to know that obviously we don't do anything crazy in the audience. So those are the key things we're looking for. We're looking for moments of beauty, and also wow. And we want to mix those two and blend those two. And all about building a light show is all about blend. Yeah. So we want to balance.
Yeah. A lot of times, the audience is going to walk into a room that you have a walk-in look, right? You've designed a walk-in look. And I almost always try to use a either static or almost static. If I'm going to use any kind of gobo rotation or anything, it's going to be really, really slow, really, really subtle. And I'm looking for it to be extremely beautiful. And I know that I've done that job. If people walk in, and as they're walking into the space, their head starts looking everywhere, because they're like taking in the beauty of the whole thing. And sometimes it's in, old theaters where there's great architecture that you can use lighting to, accentuate the architecture. Or if you're dealing with a ballroom like what we had in Vegas, then you're trying to create something that has got some texture to it and some, something that's interesting to whatever. But that's really like that's going to be my first impression for them on this light show that I've designed, is like this walk-in look. And I'm always going for a beautiful look on walk-in. Do you take the similar approach when you're doing a walk-in look, or what's your...
It depends. It depends on where I'm at and what I'm doing. It depends also what the show is. That's another thing that I don't think anybody thinks of, is you got to think through your show. Like if your show is going to be a wild, eccentric, like banging, everybody's going to get lost in the sauce kind of show, then your walk-in look should be dull. It shouldn't show everybody everything.
Juxtaposition, right?
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? So it's a little bit of like what we're looking, but if your show's not going to be super wild, like a comedy show, let's take that for example. Comedy shows, their walk-in looks are normally really, really dynamic, layer filled, because the lights won't do much during the show.
Yeah, which is what we did. This is what we did at the comedy mothership. Is that the walk-in look is it's the biggest look that they have for sure.
Right, exactly. And then, but again, we'll talk about one. A good show, the McDonald's gospel tour that we did. The walk-in look was very dull. It was just blue lights along the front, and then the blinders were just lighting up the audience for some like egress kind of vibes.
Right.
If you don't know egress is emergency like safety lighting, stuff like that. But that's what we did, and it was real dull. And they were asking us just to do like a nice orange, pastel kind of like low censored vibe, because during the show we have a bunch of moments that are bang, 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 and the lights are doing a bunch of stuff. So we use all of the gobos and everything for the walk-in look. We just kind of run it out already.
Gotcha.
So that's kind of my approach, is what's the show going to look like and where are we going to sit? but also, what's the whole entirety of it going to be like?
Yeah.
What are we going to run through the show? We're going to use everything every time, or we in like kind of a corporate, kind of a low vibe mode where the lights are going to sit, stack, someone's going to talk, you know.
Yeah, and you already jumped into darkness, but musically, what happens a lot of times musically, which is, just another form of art, is that the music will have a build, and then it'll have like a stop. And it's like, it's making the audience just, like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen next? And then the music will hit them with whatever the hook is or the drop or, whatever that element is. And so a lot of what we're trying to do in lighting is we're trying to mimic that moment with them. And I personally love, like, lights are, kind of building, but I'm not really giving the whole thing away. And then in that moment of pause, just turning everything off. It's like, blackout, and then it's almost like the rig just broke, there's nothing.
Sticks going dark.
Yeah. And then you really just hit them with that thing. And I think it's important to look for those moments in lighting.
Absolutely. And that's something that sometimes, sadly, if you're just kind of pinching for a show or you're just, busking somebody, on a regular show, you don't always have that option. But that's kind of like based off when you're building a show, build your moments of darkness. Don't just rely on a grand master on the side just to pull down. Like that's very inefficient. That's also going to kill all your power if you have power running through your console. You know what I'm saying? So program yourself some blackouts for some spots, some even and odds that are just kills, or they're just fixtures recorded at dark. Like that. Those are things that you can add to your show to just expand your knowledge. And I wish we had like a lot of time to talk about console setup and like what we would do there, because that would be a decent thing. But looking for moments, of darkness is intense, but it's not always just given. So you have to find those moments. So let's say an artist is drinking water, moment of darkness. Spotlight, single spot on there. Let them drink the water, black everything out, and then they go, okay, let's go, and then bam, hit them with something crazy. These are items that you can think of that. Obviously we're giving away free tools and this is exciting and everything's awesome. But, look for the moments that make sense. Don't black it out if you're, pastors starting to pray on stage.
And to your point, when you are doing a flash and trash show, you can still think through moments that you need to incorporate darkness, and there's times where it's okay if the art on the music on stage, if you don't really know the music, but if you're a lighting designer and you do a lot of flash and trash, you can get a sense of where the music is going. It's okay that you turn everything off for a moment so that when that beat drops the way that it's supposed to, then you can just really hit them with it. Now, timing can be difficult if you don't know the content, but you still got to look for those moments, right?
Absolutely. You definitely have to look for those moments. And I'm a big component. If you don't know where to look, if you don't know how to find those moments, follow your drummer.
Yeah, there you go.
Because if he stops drumming, he stops doing his kick thing. Most people are not going to keep going. He's kind of the heart of there. You have the do for a reason. He's the heartbeat. Everybody talks about that. And, shout out to the drummers, because they're keeping us lighting guys employed for sure.
Yeah, there you go.
I definitely follow the drummer, and he'll give us the moments of darkness, raise the sticks, pull the sticks, like also learn your artist. You don't know your artist, take a second to just watch how they do stuff on stage, because they'll give certain signs of how they want their ears to be fixed or how they want the lighting to be fixed. If they have some artists have opinions, or they'll give you, just cues of when they're going to do something. Some artists will turn around, look at the drummer, and then turn back around, and that'll let them know they're about to kill the entire set.
Young artists that aren't used to touring or aren't used to being a part of a light show, if you want to say it that way, a lot of times when you go to the stage and you go talk to them about that stuff, like, hey, my name's Jacob. I'm going to be running lights today, and I want to make sure that I'm just kind of following along with you guys. Do you have any cues? Does your acoustic guitar center, acoustic guitar, drop the neck when he's going to do stuff? Is the drummer going to? It actually helps the young artists go, oh, like I'm a part of a whole thing. I'm a part of a much larger production than just me, and they're so worried about doing their thing. But it does help them, feel like, okay, now I'm on a team of professionals that are trying to make the best thing for the audience. And I've always found that those have been positive conversations. Sometimes I don't know what to say. Sometimes they're like, I don't know, never thought about it. It's like, okay, don't worry about it.
I was like, yeah, we do.
All right, cool. So, and then, the key thing was moments of wow. And that might be obvious, but when you're creating a light show, you're really trying to get a moment where you can just show off, and I know that, people are probably there for the musicians, or they're there for the dance, or they're there for but still me as an artist, there's a moment where I just want to be like, okay, this is my moment. I'm just going to give them everything. And I call it really the big reveal, right? And when you're talking about the big reveal, here's some things that I've thought about. I need to be patient, and not just like go after it all at once, and to be patient with it. I'm going to look for moments of calm, like, where things kind of come down and then they're going to build back up. And then once I've done my big reveal and I've shown them everything my rig is capable of, then the rest of the show, I can bring in variation of that. And I can start bringing in those elements and unique elements and start adding them to other pieces or whatever. So it is, I know that that's kind of ethereal, but that's what art is, right? It's a little bit,
Absolutely.
So talk to us about, how do you think about that kind of big reveal, that wow moment in your world?
Absolutely. And I will tell you, I'm the first one that I've messed this up plenty of times. And as a lighting guy, nobody really ever is harder on you than yourself when you mess this up, and especially like I've messed this up in some of my favorites, like when I was working some of my own favorites, I'm like, man, I can't believe I really trashed that, but look,
what does it mean to mess it up? What do you,
messing it up? Like, when we call it a lot of different drums, you don't want to, you don't want to, hit the pinata too early.
There you go. That's,
yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like that's a big deal. And if you do that, you don't always have another pinata.
You don't have anywhere to go. Right?
Right.
If you just, if too early in the show, you just show them, like, do the big reveal and you do everything, then you don't, now the pinnacle's already been reached and you don't have anywhere to go. Right.
Exactly. And we always say, you can't up the ante when you're torturing somebody, and you can't up it if you just reach max torture. Like that's how we talk about it in the industry. It sounds rough, but it means a lot when you think about it, because if you hit them with something super awesome, then when something awesome actually happens, you have to hit them with something awesomer. Yeah. And there's never really anything awesomer than what you already hit them with. So a lot of examples, just pushing examples out: smoke, haze, those things. Also jets, CO2 jets, lasers, a disco ball, motion. Motion's also a big thing. You don't want to move too early. Yeah. And these are all things that you just have to be patient. You have to be patient understanding your show. You have to understand, like, I don't want to say always understand the music, because some people don't understand the music, but when you're looking up an artist, or when an artist, you're saying, hey, I've got a gig for this artist at this local show or local venue, and you already know about it. Mm-hmm. One thing people don't do is you don't look up your music. You got to look up the music. If the top 4 songs on the charts are these songs, they're not going to play those first. They're
not. Right. And I think that's if you and I were giving a talk to musicians about how to build a set list, that would be in the same conversation, right? It's like, you gotta, yes, you want to get the audience excited at the top of the show. Yes, of course. But you also want to save your best stuff for the right moment in the show, because then that's when, like, you're just going to take them to a whole nother level. If you sing all of your hits at the top of your set list, and then they have to sit through 45 minutes of songs that they've never heard before, they're going to leave going, well, I wish I'd have left 45 minutes earlier.
You're going to make, like, the parents who have kids to go to bed at 8 happy, but that's about it, because they're going to go home early.
Right, exactly.
And it's the same thing. Like, when you do the same thing, it's just like finishing all your work really early, and then you still have to sit there and wait for your job to let you clock out.
Yeah.
It's weird, because you've already done what you've come to do. You've already come to be the wow guy. You've already come to do everything. Yeah. And so patience is very, very key. And that's one thing that I personally have always struggled with. And one thing that I know, like, as a lighting guy, that's why I'm a lighting guy, is because I struggle with that. But behind the console, learning to execute, shout out to the word execute for lighting guys out there and lighting nerds, but execute efficiently on time and then executing like well. You know what I'm saying? Like when you execute, don't just throw it up there and say, yep, house lights are on, we're good. Like say audio guys don't just unplug microphones before fading them or muting them. It really irks them. It really irks some of us lighting guys when you don't fade in and out or when you have dirty transitions, and those are patience. And looking for moments within the patience while you're waiting, looking for moments of calm or after the calm, before the calm, when they're going to dial down, when they're going to beat back up. Like I said, follow your drummers. Your drummer is going to let you know. He's crashing cymbals and like hitting drums and doing a bunch of stuff. And you're just sitting there with your fingers, like waiting for something to happen. You've waited too long. You're being too patient, but if he's in there just doing like the, and you're like strobing the entire run, then you're not being patient at all. You're not waiting for the calm. So really, really look for like the calm moments, because those moments actually make you a better lighting designer and a better lighting person than like the big flash and trash moments. Like I've known people to be around me and can flash and trash their butts off. Yeah. They can program some of the best strobe sequences I've ever seen, but they can't sit behind a console and wait for someone to finish talking before they change a lighting transition, or before they move or something. Like it's just a bunch of like just stacked on top of layers on top of layers of like what you have to do in order to make this a clean show. And a clean show is not just one song. It's not just one. It's doors open to doors closed. Everybody in production understands that it's doors opens to doors closed. That's how it works.
I'm going to take a moment here to give a shout out to our video partner, Guitar Center Professional. Many of you think that Guitar Center Professional is dedicated towards only professional musicians, but that's not true. They are also dedicated to professional AV people just like me and Jacob, and just like you. Now, how does Guitar Center Professional help you? Well, they have account managers across the nation. They build a relationship with you. They try to understand what your projects are, and they make sure that you get the best prices on gear. So if you want to get in touch with your Guitar Center Professional account manager, make sure that you follow the information in the description below. So Jacob, we're gonna try to shift gears here and get towards as we're running out of time. We want to give you an opportunity to show us some stuff that you've done. I know that you don't have everything on a professional camera or whatever. Some of it might be cell phone, whatever. But just talk us through some of the shows that you've done. Some content. I think that's the things that people are really interested in, that they can really kind of look at and grab some ideas from. So I'm just going to give you the floor, and you just kind of talk us through stuff.
So one thing we talk a lot about is variation. We talk a lot about moments after the calm, and we also talk about like kind of the big wow moments. And I think this is a good picture of a lot of those elements. This is one of the very, very first shows or sets I've ever designed. It was a men's conference for a church that I was working for. These are Haze jets, Antari, I remember P7s, I think, but basically there was a big moment where the church and the pastor saw a conference and he saw Haze jets and he wanted them, but they don't always want to pay the price for what it costs to do everything. That's normal church world. We can get around that for sure.
And what you mean by that is they don't want to pay for traditional pyro, which can be extremely expensive. And so this fixture right here is actually a knockoff of pyro.
Correct. Yeah. It just runs off of 120. You just trigger it through DMX. So it's lighting. And a lot of what we do as lighting guys is trying to figure out how to get around some creative hurdles. So we designed this, threw some Haze jets on the ground, and then you'll notice I've got some key elements. I've got a keyboard guy here. He's doing his thing. I've got a guitar pedal here doing his thing. And then I've got a whole band section kind of up top. Sorry, I didn't realize I was not on there. I have a band section up top, keyboard, then guitar. And you'll notice like I put some key elements here. I put a fixture here and here, and then we put kind of our set behind it. There's also a jet, up and down, and that just kind of gives us kind of like what we call like a cathedral look. The cathedrals have like these steeples that come in, and so like as I'm designing certain stages, especially for like a men's conference or a big like EDM show or something, I'm looking for a way to kind of bring us into a centered look. An EDM or DJ artist is going to be right there in the center. And so you want to, I would consider them, rake them in, rake the like visuals in.
Yeah.
That's just, it doesn't have to be straight either. So this is just a straight on. We also have like a low platform here on the ground for, the main person to walk out and like talk. And I've lit that really well so we can see that. And this is just kind of like a generic flow look. We got some movers and some screens.
Let me push pause. Go back to that just real quick.
Yep.
Funny story. I was doing a corporate conference and we were in the tech run-throughs, just so the executives are on stage and they're just running through their slides or whatever. And it's a client that I had worked with for many years, so they knew me well. I would not recommend doing this if you don't know your client well. But we had a bunch of those, those geysers is what I called them.
Yep.
We had a bunch of them on stage prepped for when they were going to do a DJ party, in the same space later. So I'd already tested them. I already knew that they worked and everything. And the whole ballroom is completely, dead of energy. There's nothing going on. And the CFO is on stage and he's just running through his slides. And they hit $1 billion in sales for the first time. And he was making kind of this big announcement that they hit $1 billion. So he's in his his tech run through. And as soon as he says it, I smash on the buttons. Geysers go off everywhere. All the lights start strobing, whatever. And everybody in the room freaked out. And then they were like, "Are you going to do that during the thing?" And I was like, "No, of course not. I'm just messing with, And they're like, "No, you should do that. That was amazing." So it ended up being a part of the actual announcement itself. They thought it was incredible. We didn't have confetti cannons, but anyways. So that's every time I see one of those geyser effect things, I think of that moment. So, all right, go ahead.
This next one, we ran lasers for a local EDM band. And one thing I like kind of pulled away from this is you'll notice the lighting kind of pulls away and lets me have it because I'm running lasers. There's another LED running light.
Got it.
That's a good backstory. So he pulls away, lets me have it. And then you'll notice I actually hand it off back to him when the screens start doing some cool stuff because I want him to be able to have it because he starts strobing here. My red starts beat. And then I pull off and let him have it because he does like a big setup. Do. Sick, big bang. You see everybody's hands move. Like these are things that you have to like really think about when you're building a show and a lighting show and a rig and what you're doing. And we were contracted to design the lighting and put lasers in, and then we got contracted to come in and run lasers. And so when you're building a show, you have to always think about the other guy as well. So me, in this instance, I wasn't running lighting, I was running lasers, but I was running it from a lighting console right next to the lighting guy. The lighting guy came with the tour. He ran the lights. We just kind of co-partnered and he kind of let me have them. But in the end, we had to like look for certain moments because when you're sharing moments of wow with video, when you're sharing moments of wow with lighting or lasers or pyro, if you're not the one controlling, you have to understand that not everybody has the same opportunities of wow that you have.
Yeah.
So if they're going to launch confetti and do pyro, maybe you don't have to strobe or do some crazy stuff with the lights. Maybe you just strobe and that's it. Or you black out. There's your moment of darkness. Your moment of darkness can be letting someone else shine. And that's kind of
that's so important too, because they talk about, the best musicians are the ones that they know what notes not to play. So you spend the first part of your journey, let's say as a guitar player, you spend the first 10,000 hours of your musical journey learning all the notes to play. And then you spend the next 10,000 hours of your musical journey of learning what notes not to play. And what that means is that you're really, it's the art of subtraction. Like, what can I take away that I don't need the spotlight on me in this moment and in order to make the holistic piece of art better. And the technical arts, it's no different, right? It's like you're saying, hey, as a technical artist, sometimes the most effective thing that I can do as a laser operator is to stop and then let the lighting guy or the video guy have their moment. And then when we work in unison with each other, it's like that much more powerful. That's a great lesson.
Absolutely. And then you'll see this when we come in together, because you'll see the videos start pop up and we come in together. It looks really, really cool. Like the audience in the whole thing just starts losing their mind. See, the video is letting the video do its thing. So I pull out, lighting's barely doing anything. And then we come in together.
Yeah, it's great.
Like the amount of like blend we have together is so cool. When
you're bobbing your head.
See this, like see how wild it gets when we're all working together, and that's because video and lighting were able to video, lighting, and lasers were all able to talk to each other like efficiently and like have a normal conversation about, hey, this is what we're gonna do, this is what the show's gonna look like. And then the lighting guy's, all right, let me have it. And I'm like, okay. And then he's like, all right, it's yours. And then I'll let him have it. And then we both go video. And then we pull off and let video have it because he's
Very
got
cool.
the nice intro there.
Yeah.
So,
Nice.
and then to end, got to end it with a nice church look. This is really new. We did a brand new set for a church, and this was a worship set. And I wanted to talk about this because we did a bunch of elements here. And if you notice all the elements here, then, bravo, but there's quite a few, and we'll go over a few. One thing, smiley faces on a dark screen, like really, really kind of a hard sell, but when we did it, it literally made a bunch of people smile. And that was the whole point. The whole point of what we do and how we do it and where we do it is just to put a smile on people's faces and let them forget about whatever they were thinking about 5 minutes before this.
Yeah.
They're here to hang out and have a good time with their friends or whoever they're here for. And so when you incorporate that ideology and that mindset of like, when you're in a concert, the whole point is these people paid good money to be here. Let's give them the best they can. Like if there's a fixture's out, we have a fixture guy that's going to fix it. If there's a speaker that's not working in the ballroom, there's going to be a guy that's going to go over there and fix it in the ballroom. So you don't have to sit there and listen to bad speakers. That's the whole point of content. I apply that ideology and that mindset to your church or to your, whatever you do as far as production. If you're just working in some cathedral and you're changing light bulbs, you apply the same like mindset, like you can't go wrong. Because if your point is like purpose, if your purpose is people, then like how can you go bad? So we did smiley faces on screens. That was kind of a big deal. And then you'll notice the big kind of like double layered or triple layered screen. And that was the projector they have mapped on like a window like frame. There's a window back there, and basically we put there's a drop screen that comes off when we mapped it. And before it was just like lyrics on it. Yeah. And we did this kind of like uniqueness, and a lot of what I call the cathedral staggered is the staggered in and in. So everybody's kind of looking to the center here, but there's also elements like the smiley faces. And then we complement all of that. You put all of those elements into a basket, and then you send it out with what we call the package of lighting, and lighting delivers it in a way that, you're tied together. You're not spread around. You're not focused on a million other things. You're like, wow, this is a really pleasant smiley. Like I got, dimension with the screen, and then I've got, the lighting is spaced out with the AB with the yellow and blue, and then we got the bars doing this, and then of course we got nice foot lighting on the feet, and everybody's lit so we can see everybody. We can definitely tell who's in charge and who's leading, because she's obviously lit. Like these are all the elements, and the drummer's got yellow because like why not? Like all these elements.
Well, this picture is actually a really great example of a well-designed rig, right? It's got a lot of symmetry. It's got a lot of dimensions, right? So we've got tops and bottom and front to back, everything. And then you have those unique elements, which you're talking about is these smiley faces or unique elements. You also have the unique elements that are the light bars on the floor that are kind of right in front of the drummer and stretched around behind the screen. Also, I mean, this is a really good example of good design. And, definitely want to thank you for sharing that. I actually want to thank you for all of your time. This has been fantastic. It's been good for you and I to just kind of nerd out. Unfortunately, we could nerd out for forever, but on this particular conversation, we're going to have to wrap it right there. But thanks a lot, Jacob. What's your last thought? And I want you to put in your mind, you've got a person that is kind of aspiring to become a lighting designer. They're aspiring to become a lighting professional in the AV world. What's your last thought for what they could do to really set themselves apart and set themselves up for success?
Don't be afraid to immerse yourself completely within whatever you're doing. If you're going to be a lighting professional, you're going to be an audio professional, if you're going to be a video content creator or a projectionist, don't be afraid to say yes and to immerse yourself completely with whatever it is you want to do. Because if I didn't completely take everything else away from my life, completely remove all distractions and say I'm completely done with anything but lighting, I don't think I would even have the same respect that I would for the people that do it better than me today. And that's important because when you fully immerse yourself into what you're doing and the passion and the craft, you're going to perfect it. You're going to devote all your next however many years you want to do to making you this difference of a person and why you want to do this. Like if you do that, then whatever the outcome is, whether you're a big name LD for whoever in the world, or you're some church guy in the background who's just doing it, you understand your primary purpose. And your primary purpose is because what you were built for, what you were designed for, created for, however you want to wrap it in a bundle and sell it to yourself, whatever. However you think in your head, if you fully immerse yourself in whatever craft you're trying to perfect, I don't see this going wrong for you at all. Because lighting, audio, video, like it's just so easy to like get lost in the weeds and what are we doing, but focus on, like, I'm a lighting guy. I love lighting every day, all day, every day. Yeah. So you couldn't pull that away from me. You couldn't even convince me otherwise, you know?
All right.
So just don't be afraid to fully immerse yourself.
Hey, thanks again. And thanks again to all of you that have been watching this conversation with me and Jacob. If this is content that you enjoy, make sure that you subscribe to the channel, that you hit like, send us a comment. I'll actually have Jacob help us monitor these comments. And if you've got a question for either one of us about lighting, please let us know and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. And we'll see you on the next one.